What is with us and not knowing how to play up small moments to become emotionally impactful? Hi, today we're reviewing Blood Vessel, a just released crime thriller that's currently streaming on Netflix, and this movie has a 119-minute runtime. This movie is written by Musa Jeffrey David. The original story is by Charles Okpaleke, and it's directed by the formidable Moses Inwang. For the synopsis, it says, brought together by chance, 6 people fleeing a town devastated by oil pollution stow away on a mysterious ship, not realizing the dangers that await. This is a very clean synopsis. We don't have too many of those, so I have to highlight this, that as far as synopsis go, this was a really good one. Now, this was quite an ambitious project, and I'll say a good effort was made. Let's discuss this film. Now, what was this movie about? I think of this movie as a classic frying pan to fire story, and it utilizes the socio-political and socio-economic backdrop of the Niger Delta oil crisis as its jump-off point. 6 young people find themselves needing to flee for a variety of reasons. We have 2 brothers, Olotu and Tekena. This is a typical Japa story. They want to leave for all the reasons people want to leave. We have 2 friends, Boma and Degbe. Their story is they're environmental activists, and they tried to protest the government about the oil spills and all the stuff connected with the oil Niger Delta crisis, but then it goes wrong and they have to escape. And then we have 2 lovers, Abi and Oyin, who are running from a dangerous family situation that quickly escalates and becomes like so much bigger. These 6 hapless people find themselves stashed in a hold in the underbelly of an oil tanker ship headed to the Americas. The main crisis of this movie is quickly established when their custodian is himself unable to board the ship and embark on this journey with them, so he leaves them the stowaways to their own fate unknown to them. Eventually, conditions below deck become critical and they have to make the decision. They are forced to come out of hiding and take their chances with the international crew of smugglers, whom we get to meet eventually. This movie features themes of survival, corruption, resilience in the face of desperation, immigration, environmental pollution, courage, love, and brotherhood. I'm sure there are myriad other themes that this movie covers, but I would say that these were the ones I'm able to highlight. Now, taking off in the Niger Delta community of Nembe in Bayelsa State, most of this film eventually plays out on board this oil tanker vessel surrounded by the vastness of the ocean. It features a few familiar faces, but overwhelmingly, the cast of this movie is just new faces that most of whom I've never seen before. Now, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched this movie, now would be a good time for you to pause, go watch it. It's streaming on Netflix, like I said, and then come back so you can really enjoy, because beyond this point, I cannot guarantee that there won't be spoilers. Oh, also, before I forget, please like this video, share, please leave a comment. I really like to hear your thoughts. Now, let's go straight to it. What worked? I think the performances were really good. Standout performances for me were Bimbo Manuel, but I mean, that's kind of like expected. And then the actors who played the characters in the love story, Adobe Dibor, I've never seen her before, and David Ezekiel, I've never seen him before either, who play Oyin and Abby respectively. Guys, does Adobe Dibor, does she remind you of Liz Benson? Because that girl is literally a young Liz Benson, and we remember Liz Benson from the 90s. Like, my goodness, she's so beautiful and she's such a talented actress, this young girl. Now, the other main characters were Levi Chikere, Obinna Okenwa, Sylvester Ekanem, and Jide Kene Achu Fusi. Jide Kene, whom I really I've admired him since I first saw him in Living in Bondage remake, and he's so hugely talented. I want to see him so much more, because I think he's a really amazing actor. I'm glad that he has dropped that swanky JKA nickname or whatever, because I was like, this guy has too much talent to be a swanky anything. Let's leave that for the stylish swanky Jerry. Now, this movie is dedicated to the memory of Sylvester Ekanem. He tragically lost his life earlier in the year, and when I saw that, I didn't see that until I saw In Memory Of at the end, and then I went to check, and then when I saw that, my heart just broke. That's the character played by one of the 2 brothers. I think that's Tekena. Such a young guy and just so talented already, and I'm glad that he got to do this. And even more so when you watch the movie, the bitter irony of the way his storyline ended. But you know, I hope his family is doing well. Now, Bimbo Manuel's character was pretty two-dimensional, but I think it was all the story needed. I like the way he graduated from a machete in the beginning of the movie to a gun at the end of the movie, but his hot temper was consistent start to finish. I really liked that, and I was just looking at him like we all knew somebody like this, like that neighborhood terror, the person that nobody could argue with, nobody could reason with. So I thought, I've never seen him in a role like that before, so I thought that was really good. I enjoyed seeing some of our old favorites like Francis Durud. I enjoyed seeing him just as I enjoyed seeing our Ghanaian friend John Dumelo. It took me a minute to recognize him though. He looks kind of different. I also enjoyed the performance by the Ukrainian actor. He's a lead as well, Alex Budin. He plays the character of Igor. I had to go look him up on IMDb, and he's got quite an impressive resume, including actually the TV series Snowfall and the movie that won Will Smith the Oscar, King Richard. So that was really impressive. I think that in this movie, characterization was good for the most part, and the characters were stayed consistent start to finish, with the exception of one key character, and that's Igor, but I'll come to that. So I enjoyed that much of the credits came in the opening credits, and I think that producers should take note of this, especially with movies that are going to Netflix, because Netflix just cuts you off. I feel like you should be given the option to watch the credits, and if you don't want to watch it, you can end the movie there. It just feels disrespectful to the talent and all the people who work so hard on films. I don't know why they do that. Why are you rushing us out? In the cinema, we sit and let the credits roll. That's the respectful thing to do, in my opinion. So I think more filmmakers, more producers should give people opening credit if Netflix wants to behave like that. All right, production design was good, as was art direction. The sets looked good. They felt lived in. Look, the locations were really great in this movie. I thought makeup was really good. The lighting, I would say, was efficiently done. I enjoyed the multiplicity of language and the switching between Ijaw, Pidgin to English, and eventually when we had our international cast, their language as well, whether it was Russian they were speaking or Ukrainian language. I don't know if their language is similar. It probably is, right? But I enjoyed that so much. This movie touched on a few topical issues and relevant themes. I thought that the love story was sweet. I thought it was very tender, their love story, and I think it had a lot to do with the talent of the actors themselves. Apart from the story, they really pulled it off, both of them. To an extent, I would say that this movie managed to keep up the tension, especially in the beginning portion of the movie, maybe not as consistently the rest of the way. I thought it was brilliant how the community crisis was used as the melting point to bring all these stories, meaning all these characters together. I thought that was very well done. I liked how they showcased that one thing Niger Delta people will do is swim. We had at least 3 survival stories where people got to safety because they swarmed these incredibly frightening waters, right? So I thought that was very nice to see. It was a little love letter to the people of the Niger Delta, because they're famous for really like knowing how to swim from when they're itty bitty kids. I thought that the cinematography was competent, and I thought that the directing, again, these technical things are not really my strong suit. You see that I always run through them to get to the story, and we're getting there. I'll say that the soundtrack was good as well. Not the score, I'll get to the score, but the soundtrack, I thought it was really good. I thought the premise was good, how they all came to be on the boat. I've already said using the community crisis as a melting pot. All in all, this was not a bad viewing experience. I think I enjoyed it a bit more the second time around, but I really, something I enjoyed, it was Boma and Degbe's slangs. I really enjoyed their dialogue, the slangs that they used, and there was a lot of nautical language there, which I thought was very amusing. Now, as much as I enjoyed the things that I've highlighted, this movie was far from perfect. So let's talk about the things that did not work. Let's start with the narration at the beginning of this movie. I have a few points under this particular heading. First of all, I thought it was doing too much. It was giving Pandora, name based Pandora, but okay. And then for me, it just came off like the words did not sound like the character. Those words did not sound like, when we got to know Abe, if you go back and listen, you'll be like, nope, this sounds like the writer put these words in his mouth. Also, even the depiction, throughout the movie, he was not depicted in a way that showed him to have this kind of observation and appreciation of the environment. If anything, it was Oyin who, she seemed to have this kind of reverence of things sacred, but not him. When I heard the lines, this whatever was a masterpiece of unparalleled beauty, yes, the Niger Delta is beautiful, but the shots that they used to say that, I was like, this is the unparalleled. And then I also thought that it was funny how the film opens with Abe criticizing the environmental pollution, right, in that opening narration. But earlier, chronologically, as far as the story, earlier, he had queried the point of an environmental activist or fighter in his argument with Boma. My final word, as far as the narration, is that when you know the way the story unfolds, if you come back, that whole narration just does not work. The slavery storyline, it felt forced on the story. I don't know why it was there. It was out of place. These young men started sobbing. I was like, they were just going for unearned emotional currency here. The dialogue in this movie was functional, but at times it was a tad expository, and also at times it was over-explanatory. I said before that the soundtrack was good, and I said not the score. The score, at some point in this movie, the score was so upsetting that if I did not have to do this review, I would have stopped. It was actually triggering. Mostly that beginning portion during like the community crisis and all that, it was just triggering. I did not like it at all. Let's get to the story, which is my favorite part. I like to take a story apart. Let me start with the first thing that kind of had me go, The whole Oyin being a water baby storyline, I thought it was unnecessary. We already had a strong enough reason. We already had that story where the father said, you cannot marry a half-breed, right? We did not need that extra layer of her mom went to the river to ask for the baby or whatever it is. I did not like the first mysticism of the snake-eating curse. It was also, again, unnecessary. This story already had all the elements it needed for things to go haywire. We did not need that extra layer of mysticism. I did, however, enjoy the irony of Boma and Degbe being environmental activists, but also being so disrespectful as to kill a sacred python, which I could also look at it through the lens of an endangered species, but they didn't care, right? Sometimes this movie just forgot about things, and the first one I'm going to mention, there's another I'll mention later when I get to just talking about that within a context, but the one I want to mention here is the pregnancy. They just kind of treated it like they needed it as a plot device in the beginning to create complication in that relationship, and then it was kind of forgotten. I never heard it come out the whole time they were stowed away. I definitely did not hear it come out when Abe was begging for Oyin's life. She's pregnant or something. It never came up. So I was like, well, they used it and discarded it. I want to say this. Something that bothered me is for a character-driven story, I felt like there was not a lot of internal conflict. All the conflict in this movie was outward facing. I didn't see, and in my opinion, the former is more interesting. And this movie completely disregarded the concept of time. Was like time is a human construct, because I don't know how long the events of this movie spanned. I have no idea. I have no idea how long they were on that ship. We know how long it takes to prepare a ship for voyage, right? Especially a huge voyage like this going to the Americas. So I don't know how long they were there before this vessel started moving. I don't know how long from that coast to the coast in Accra. I don't know how long to the next point. Was that Cape Verde? I think it was. I don't know. I have no idea. And that really did not help with tension, because there's a huge difference in people being stowed away 2 days worth of desperation versus 2 weeks worth of desperation. And I think it really took away from the tension that this movie really tried to build and maintain. And so, it was critical to understand time in order to just have a full appreciation of the growing desperation among these people. I feel that more could also have been done with conflict within the group. In a situation like this, before we ever got above deck, the first thing that should have happened was clashes among them for scarce resources. I thought that as far as their sojourn within that stowaway quarters, not enough was done with that. For emotional impact, for one thing, that slop bucket, it started smelling without them showing us even the discomfort of who had taken a dump or a piece or whatever it is, like make it visual for us, right? Then after that, when somebody said, something is smelling, that was the last we saw of that slop bucket. It never featured again. So this is just about picking things up, using it whenever you want to use it, and then just dropping it and forgetting about it. You're supposed to create a situation where there's escalation. Different things are coming up and it's not getting better. The slop bucket, if anything, that situation is going to get worse. Hunger is going to get worse. Lack of oxygen in that space is going to get worse. Heat is going to get worse. Or if it's cold, it's going to get worse. Everything is going to get worse. So you cannot forget. People were swigging alcohol. We didn't see dehydration play out, because when I saw them drinking, I was like, you guys are going to be in for it. I think there could have been like a more gradual build up and value change, emotional value change from hope to hopelessness, and just for us to be able to observe that the build up of that desperation, perhaps eventually forcing the characters to make difficult decisions. And I'm talking about, again, internal conflict in the group before it went outside, away from them. That took away so much from the story. The fact that, again, this conflict was all outward facing. It didn't help this movie. When they cut straight to them being on the upper deck, and we never got to see the moment when they were summoned to come up from where they were hiding, I felt that was a huge lost opportunity for emotional impact. There were a number of little instances like this where the story could have gleaned a lot of emotional impact and it was missed. What is with us and not knowing how to play up small moments to become emotionally impactful? I thought that more could have been done with Igor's characterization to prepare us for the switch. See that switcheroo they pulled with him? I didn't like it. There was nothing in his character that really prepared me for what came just out of nowhere. It gave very Daenerys in King's Landing level of switch. Because of that, I felt like most of the third act just did not work. There was nothing in his character that prepared us for that. I knew all the things I needed to know about him, as far as, yes, he's a smuggler, yes, he's a businessman, he knew what he was doing, as far as all of those things. But you did not show us cruelty until all of a sudden he just started to pile on the cruelty, and it didn't work. Which brings me to, again, another point on why that third act did not work. I wish there had been more immersion into the ship's environment, right, guys? A ship at sea has its own set of difficulties, complications, and just vicissitudes, right? Instead of playing these up, they decided to rely on a lazy plot of a crazed sociopath to create conflict. I didn't enjoy any of that, because this story, inherent in itself, had a lot of opportunities to create like natural conflict. And then if we had all of these other elements in addition, it could have worked. But to just ignore all of that, the environment was not used at all, right? So everything that happened in this movie, it could have happened on an airplane, it could have happened on a train, it could have happened on a bus. The ship as a character did not come into play. Blood vessel. Why? Even as an element of storytelling, right? Using not just the ship, but also the water, whether to mirror whatever was happening on the ship and in the story, or to contrast. But throughout this voyage, I think the sea was pretty calm. Like, I've never seen a calmer sea, just start to finish. Every time there was an establishing shot, the water was just calm. Anyway, for all these reasons and more, the third act just fell flat. There are a few things that I found just confusing. For one thing, this was a crewless ship. This ship had no visible crew. The only person we saw eventually was the captain, and then we saw him just as much as we needed to see him when he was tied up, and then he disappeared again. This is his ship. He's the captain. We know all the romantic stories of a captain goes down with his ship. This captain seemed content to let all the disaster play out on his ship, and then he came up at the end to clear up the bodies. Gosh. And so, all said and done, I would say that this movie was just okay. It didn't knock my socks off. As I said in the beginning, I appreciate the effort and the scale. I appreciated so much being introduced to these new faces. I appreciated the daringness and ambitiousness of this undertaking. I do. But purely from an entertainment point of view, I think there was no new exciting perspective here. And also, let me tell you, I have real fatigue with these larger-than-life stories. I'm not saying that we should not try, but we're not so equipped to pull off these stories convincingly. I'm tired of these big, larger-than-life stories. They're leaving me exhausted with a lot of blood and gore and shooting and all the things. I'm tired of big stories. Let me just say that with no fault of these movies, it cannot bear the entire burden. Its predecessors have come and done part of the work and chipped, and now I'm just exhausted. Okay, so this movie is a casualty of that. So I cared about the love story, and in theory, I cared about these people arriving their destination safely. However, Did I care about any individual character? I don't think so. I didn't know anything about Abe, with the exception of the fact that he had a family that loved him and that he loved Oyin more than life itself. But I didn't know anything about him as a person, his goals, his ambitions, his plans, or whatever. Even this Japa was not his story. You know, like, he didn't plan to go anywhere. So I can't even care about that like it was a goal or an objective for him. In the beginning, among the themes, I mentioned immigration, right? But I didn't say it with any real conviction, because it works when the characters, they've weighed the cost of this journey against whatever they're running away from and made an assessment that yes, we're embarking on this journey with that full knowledge. And what that does is that it speaks to the desperation of whatever they're running away from and whatever they're running towards. The fact that they've made a careful calculation and they're like, yes, it's still worth it to me even if I die trying. So this movie didn't really cut it for me in that way, because most of the people who ended up in this situation, they basically just stumbled onto this ship. And even the ones who planned to be on this ship, they didn't plan to go under these particular circumstances as stowaway. And so for that, I'm going to say that I'm economical with mentioning immigration as one of the themes of this movie. I recommend this movie because, like I said, it was a good effort. I won't say a good attempt, because to be honest with you, I don't know what really was being attempted here. And I also cannot say that I'm clear about what the thematic focus was. So I'm going to rate this movie a 6 out of 10. And that 6 is mostly because of these beautiful, beautiful people, and also for pulling a big actor. But as far as the movie itself, it wasn't terribly exciting for me. There were good moments. It was not a bad viewing experience. It just was not an incredible viewing experience. I'm shameless. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to do all the things, to like, to comment, to subscribe to my channel. Please share with your friends if you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to check out my other videos. And what do I always say? You have the right to an incredible viewing experience, so never settle. Thank you.